Hello, NAAIA community. Get ready to relive insightful discussions, gain fresh perspectives, and be inspired by the wealth of knowledge our community has to offer. Let's dive into another episode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of NAAIA, thank you for joining today's Agent Roundtable Summer Sales Playbook, What's Working Right Now. My name is Rebekah Ratliff, and I serve as the National Board Secretary and Global Relationships Liaison for NAAIA. In addition to my work as mediator and arbitrator at JAMS, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's conversation. At NAAIA, we understand that success in the insurance industry requires more than technical expertise or product knowledge. It requires adaptability, discipline, relationship building, and the ability to remain resilient in an environment that is constantly evolving. For agents especially, summer can present a unique mix of opportunity and challenge. For some, it is a season of momentum filled with referrals, renewals, and new business opportunities. For others, it can bring slower pipelines, increased shopping behavior, pricing objections, and the constant pressure to maintain production while continuing to serve clients well. That makes conversations like this especially important. Today's roundtable is designed to move beyond theory and into practical application. This is not about generic sales advice or one-size-fits-all solutions. It is about learning directly from professionals who are actively navigating today's market and finding strategies that are producing real results. We know the sales landscape continues to shift. Consumer expectations are changing, competition is increasing, pricing pressures remain high, and client loyalty can no longer be assumed. It must be continually earned through trust, service, and value. At the same time, we recognize something equally important. Even as diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts face increasing scrutiny across industries, NAAIA's commitment remains unwavering. Our mission to support, develop, and elevate Black and African American insurance professionals has not changed. In moments where systems evolve, where support structures shift, communities become more important and essential. This is why NAAIA continues to create spaces like this. Spaces where professionals can learn from one another, exchange practical insight, and gain tools that strengthen both performance and long-term career growth. Our hope today is simple, that you leave this session with actionable strategies that you can apply immediately, whether that means improving your prospecting efforts, identifying new cross-sell opportunities, strengthening retention conversations, or simply approaching client relationships with renewed focus and confidence. Most importantly, we hope you leave reminded that success in this industry is not built in isolation. It is strengthened through shared experience, collective wisdom, and a willingness to learn from one another. Thank you again for joining us today and investing in your growth. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Precious Norman Walton, who will guide us through today's discussion.
Hey, good afternoon. I am so excited to be here with all of you and have this very necessary discussion about what we're doing at the mid-year mark. So it is officially July, y'all. 4th of July is over. Hopefully you guys had a safe celebration, 250 for the nation, all those good things. But now it's time to get back to work. So as mentioned, my name is Precious Norman Walton. So I am the Affinity Program Manager for NAAIA. Lots of discussion about that. If you're not familiar with the program, check with your chapter leadership because we've done a relaunch that we're really excited about. But today we're here to really talk about it's summertime. What are we doing out here? The market is still hard. Things are still, the economy is economizing, but we still have objectives and we still have a duty and a goal in front of us to finish strong. So I'm so thankful to be joined here today with two really strong agency customer facing, folks that are in the trenches with the rest of us to drop their nuggets of wisdom and share their successes. So I will introduce them and then allow them to share a little bit about their insurance story, their background, and then we'll jump right into today's topic. So first off, I want to introduce Maya Hill. So if you can just let the people know, the NAAIA family, a little bit of background, how you came to the party, because you kind of have a unique entry into this, not like some of us who kind of fell and got stuck. So I'll let you share with the audience here what your framework is for this conversation.
Well, again, my name is Maya Hill. I have been in the insurance industry. I've been licensed in the insurance field for 23 years, but I've been surrounded by the insurance for my lifetime. I'm a legacy. My father jumped into insurance in the 70s, and my mother came and she became an agent. And she was an agent with Allstate, and then she became independent. And I joined her, and that's where we stayed for 14 years. And then my sister, she's another legacy. So that's three generations. I've seen growth at all different times. And I'm excited to share what's going on. What I feel like what's happening this summer is it's slower. It's slower. So you have to keep busy. The phone calls aren't coming in as much. So you have to make a lot of them going out. And you have to get into the community and be able to work your business, work your book. That's what I think so far.
Amazing. And she is representing what chapter?
The Tampa Bay chapter. Yeah.
So we are so excited to have her here and to hear from her as far as some of these. She's alluded to the strategy of how do we survive this slow, hot summer. Also, we have joining us today, Branden Weber. Go ahead and tell the people your insurance background and what chapter you're representing and kind of what you're bringing to the conversation, sir.
Yeah, so Branden Weber, I'm based out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, of course, representing the Louisiana chapter. And my insurance background is varied. I started off about 19 years ago working with a captive. I've owned my own agency, scaled from a scratch agency, scaled and sold my own agency, and then now I'm working in the brokerage space. And it says sports and entertainment, which just means it's a different type of headache, but it's all relatively the same when it comes to interfacing with clients and what the market is today. And Maya, I love your story about being in a legacy in the insurance industry, and I find that my story is like a lot of others in the chat where it's like, oh yeah, insurance, yeah, I'll try that, and then 19 years later, here I am. So something has stuck with me. So I'm honored to be here with you guys.
Amazing. Thank you for that. So yeah, in the chat, I'm actually kind of curious now that we kind of threw it out there, who intended to get into the space, because shout out to our HBCUs, shout out to our risk management and insurance graduates. That's really, more in the forefront. I think back when I was choosing a major in school, that really wasn't as prevalent. So it is something now. Hopefully we're getting a message out and continue to do so, that this is the place to be. This is what you want to do. You can protect your community. You can do good and do well. So with that, Maya, you mentioned, the phones aren't ringing. People aren't
Yeah.
reaching out as much as they used to. So what have you seen as an effective strategy of getting in front of prospects and getting the messaging out that even though it's kind of quiet, that coverage is there, whether you can feel it or not. It's not tangible, but it's absolutely necessary.
So what I do during these times, summer is a slower period for me. And what I do is I go through my book of business. I'm calling, I'm asking for referrals, and I'm getting out in the community so I can negotiate and network with the community. And that's what I've done. And as far as marketing, I send out more emails and I'm trying to stay in touch. I'm picking up the phone more than I've done like at different seasons during the period. But that's what has worked for me.
That's awesome because I think it's really important that our customers don't just look at us as a transactional figure when it comes to renewals or even binding new coverage, but we establish that relationship mentality. And so, Branden, when you think about relationships and visibility, what are some of the things that you've been able to employ successfully to get in front of people and continue having these conversations?
Yeah, I think relationships are paramount because, like you said, you're going to interact with somebody throughout the course of their lives and you're looking to build a book of business, those touch points are going to be they're going to be a lot more frequent in some scenarios than they would be infrequent. So one of the things that I've been doing is really getting to know my client base and then living where they live. For example, if I know that they are fans of artwork and I have relationships with art councils and those types of different entities, then I make connections and say, hey, I saw this really cool art event. I thought this might be something you'll be interested in. Here are the dates and time. Would you like to attend? So that's one way to deepen the relationship. But then also, too, is creating insurance conversations. How are you transporting your art? Do you have anything on consignment? What do those things look like for you in your home? And when's the last time you've had a review? So that works for current clients, but then also, too, potential clients, because at these particular events, looking at living in their world in particular, you have opportunities to engage with them differently, spend some time and understand who all is within their network. And then one of the things I always say is don't keep me a secret. If you like what I've done for you, don't share the wealth now. Don't be selfish. Understand this is how I go about my business. But if you like the job that I've done for you, here are conversations we're having that you're not having with your circle. And invariably, just like a restaurant recommendation, if I ask you, I'm coming to Charlotte and say, what's a good restaurant? People from Charlotte and say, bro, you got to try this. And that's what I want that conversation to be with among my clients.
I love that, especially the restaurant comparison. I was just thinking about that. I was like, oh, sometimes when you have your little diamond in the rough that you discovered, and you're like, do I want to put them on? Because right now the wait times. But then you have to remind yourself too that I don't do enough business to keep them open. So I definitely, the way that I show gratitude is by sharing the news. And I think we do that when it comes to a lot of other products and things that we engage with as consumers. So when you're thinking about how do you ask for that referral, how do you phrase it? And I'll ask Maya first. How do you phrase it to where it feels like you're offering to help and that it's not just a sales pitch that your friends are going to get upset later that you that you shared
Yeah.
their information?
Generally, I try to educate all my customers and I allow them to sell themselves because I just tell them about the product and then they'll ask questions and then we'll get on that relationship. We'll start building that relationship. And I listen to things that people are not saying, because
Mm.
if you start a conversation and then they'll tell you more than what you need to know, you just take notes, then that will propel the conversation further.
I love
Yeah.
that, Brendan.
Because I'm such an introvert when it comes to work and I'm so shy, I'll try to get them to ask me. And the way that I just phrase that is at that point, initially when we're having a conversation, I set up the dynamic. Hey, listen, we're going to look at your total risk. We're going to look at things that may have you exposed to some things that you may have not discussed. Along that way in that process, I'm going to ask you for other people that will benefit from a conversation like this.
Mm.
And typically what I find is they say, oh, you forgot to ask me. I'm so glad you reminded me. Hey, do you know of anyone else I can help? Because I try to frame it where you don't want to come across salesy, but the expectation is I've done a good job for you. So then that puts the pressure on me to make sure I've performed in a way that they would want to send somebody else, want to connect me or be affiliated in some way with the job that I've done. So at that point, it becomes a conversation. And if I've done the steps along the way, if I built a relationship, had the conversation, performed in the way that they've expected me to perform, then it's a lot easier and it just becomes a simple conversation. And hey, who else? I mean, why? And again, why are you keeping me a secret? What? There's no love here. You don't. You just want to keep me all to yourself? Like, what are we doing? So, we have those conversations.
That's awesome because building community, sharing, the relationships, especially when it comes to subject matter expertise, because we want to be that go-to, excuse me, that trusted advisor when it comes to this. Now, I remember, in back in the day, the lure that we used to try to use was, hey, let me see if I could save you some money. Well, we all know that right now in this market, in this environment, that alone, you may be able to, maybe. But what is it that you are sharing with your prospects, with your clients? Like, what is the ROI and the benefit in having that sit down meeting? If it's not going to be shaving dollars off of my premiums, why do I want to make an appointment, Maya, with you and discuss my coverage?
Well, I want to discuss the coverage so you know that I'm taking care of you. I'm looking out for your best interests. And then we can go over some holes if you have any questions about your policy. I just want them to know that I'm looking at their policy and I care about them and their business. And so that's where I go from there. I think relationship building is the key, as Branden was saying. I try when I talk to people on the phone, I'll try to find out somewhere where they're living. And if I know someone, oh, and then they feel more welcome, like, oh, you can understand, yeah. So I've
I
been on
love
the
that.
community on the street for 20 years. So they all know me and it feels great.
And having that trust and that relationship, and what I'm hearing is that reputation that you're in the community, you're of the community, you're serving the community. And Branden, you kind of mentioned that as well about being visible and being in the places and the spaces that you know matter to your customers. So, what is the value proposition that you're sharing when you're asking people, hey, let me, put me in touch with others that may need my services, other than the let me save you some money, because we already know that's not guaranteed to
Yeah.
happen anymore.
A couple thoughts. If there's a problematic state, so to speak, then that's the states I find myself in. California, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, all the fun states to have insurance. So to that end, if I'm having an initial conversation, I like, to the degree that I can't control it, I like to research. I was going to say stalk, but research for all the public information. But in all seriousness, the value proposition is just a couple things are going to happen from this conversation. Either going to find out that your current relationship is amazing and they've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, or you're going to find some things that you need to address. And if we can address those together, and I can show you ways that can benefit you and not only mitigating your risk, but also set you up better than you are currently, what would be the harm in looking at that? So you set the dynamic that, hey, you may not save money. I don't want to talk money. I don't even want to guarantee you I'm going to save money because, if you take the car analogy, if all cars are not priced the same. So if you're in one vehicle and you're looking to upgrade the vehicle, if they tell you, hey, we're going to do that the same way and we're going to save you money, you'd be unwise not to take that. But we also know that's unwise not to say that because that's not possible. So I just try to take rate off the table and just go on a fact-finding mission. Let's just uncover your life and figure out where are the holes. And if you can plug them here, I will give you the information. Now go to your current advisor, your current relationship, and say, here are the things that I want done. If they can get them done, great. Well, you'll remember the fact that these things weren't pointed out over the last few years. And I find myself that I win more often than not.
I love that. I love that because I think a lot of times people have an agent of record, a broker of record, but they don't have that line of communication where they're comfortable really just having these very organic conversations. I know that for years when I would reach out to people for an annual review, what they're hearing is she's going to try to sell me something else. She's going to try to get me to spend more money. So Maya, how do we get past that perception that coverage, that your motivation is earning a commission off of selling something to them versus making sure that they're being taken care of?
Well, I want to hear from them and hear what's going on in their life so that I can adjust the conversation. Don't start off with sales pitch. Start off with how are you doing and move into that. And people, they will tell you what's going on, and then we can build a conversation based on that. I've had countless stories of people telling me about their in-laws or their other people in their family, what's going on with them. And I'm like, okay, we can dabble on that. But then we come back to insurance and I've built that trust with them, generally speaking. And so they don't mind sharing more. Yeah.
Now, I want to piggyback on something you said a little bit earlier, as far as people kind of sharing and speaking, and oftentimes you're using that info to dig deeper and uncover some of these risk gaps that they didn't know that they have. Do you have an example or kind of a story of when you've been able to leverage that?
As far as someone telling me something, trying to think, yes. So I've had this present customer that we're working on he has a boat and a yacht. And so I'm like, well, where are your vehicles? Where are your cars? And I think I have his house too. So I'm trying to look for the other gaps. I'm like, if you have a house and you have a boat, then there's something else out there that I can help you protect.
I
Something like
love that because where there's peanut butter, there's probably jelly. We're like, okay, there's
that.
some things that go together. So Branden, same question to you. How do you go about doing an analysis and bringing to light some of the areas where they may have an exposure or be bare that they didn't know about prior to sitting down with you?
Yeah, I think the process is questions, the going about the questions that I'm asking and just being strategic about the questions. What do you want to do? And one of the questions that I ask all the time is if something were to happen to your home, what would you expect your insurance to do? And then, I posed that question to a client recently, and from there, I found out that they were actually hiring domestic staff.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, where's your EPLI? What are we doing? What's your process? What's your vetting process? And then it's providing those resources and value. Hey, I found this amazing online background research company. I can't endorse them, but this is something I've seen my other clients use. So providing that link. So I'm just solidifying the relationships. But had I not asked that question, I wouldn't have known about some of the other needs that traditionally isn't presented or even thought about in a conversation. So I just think it comes back to asking the right question, but then that also establishes me, you, and those that we are engaging with as having the level of expertise to even know how to ask that question or know how to place that question. So
I love that. And so, reminder to the audience, you hear they're dropping all these nuggets and being very generous with sharing with you some of the strategies that have worked for them. So the Q&A question and answer area is open. So don't be shy. Go ahead. If you have questions for our panelists, drop them there and we will talk about that as well. But I want to go back to, as we're talking about, the benefit of getting in front of prospects, and the conversation always comes up in terms of having a pipeline. And so I know that in my area of expertise, X dates are a big thing because in the commercial space, people may not be able to up and leave and change on a dime without there being some repercussions and things that aren't to their benefit. So what do you do when you're talking to somebody who they're enjoying, they're buying in, they're there, but it's not yet time to pull that trigger? How do you stay in touch and keep that person, that prospect warm until it is time to actually replace the business? So Maya, I'll ask that of you first. When you see that comes up where it's a yes, but a not right now, what do we do between here and there?
Well, I make notes and I have a CRM system and I make notes and I like, oh, what their child just went to college or something like that. I will keep notes and I'll reach out to them and keep the conversation going. So pretty much that's what I do.
Okay, so you
I
just have
take,
reminders
yes, I have
to keep
reminders so that I
touching.
can reach out to yeah, to reach out to them. Correct. Reach out to my customers.
Awesome. Brandon, similar system, or do you do something different?
similar system. And one of the things I'm doing is incorporating ways to stay top of mind. And, it came as a shock to me. I said, wow, they don't think about insurance all the time. Who knew? So, taking that, one of the things I started incorporating is like a little newsletter or 5 minutes that pertains to their insurance situation. So I'll go on Insurance Business Journal every day and I'll see maybe some off the wall headline or something. Like recently, it was the guys that were posing as bears in California and they were damaging vehicles and doing insurance frauds. So I just thought that was a non-threatening way to say, hey, I saw this article. Can you believe this happened in insurance? Put that together. And then they're like, I've been meaning to call you. Or by the way, because with all the things that we have, all the competing interests that we have in our lives, I'm in insurance every day. So it's top of mind for me. But I'm realizing and just talking with my circle, my network, that it's the furthest thing away from their mind unless they have a situation. I always say insurance is something that you don't know you need until you need it. And then when you need it, you sometimes don't know how it works. So it's like, how do I make
Ain't
sense
that the
of all
truth?
that and stay present in their, top of mind and say, hey, when I think of insurance, I'm going to give Branden a call because I need to get this done. So just I've incorporated, yes, I have the CRM and those things, but for me, I'm looking at new ways to stay engaged and match their interests, because I find that that's where people are most interested in. They're most interested in what they're interested in. So
Oh,
how
yeah.
can I match their interest with my interest, and where can we align?
That's awesome. And I remember when I first got into the business, one of my mentors told me, when you have a fire on the block, what do you call the neighbor across the street? And I'm like, what? It's like a captive audience because in that moment it's literally being played out and it feels real, that it's not some abstract concept anymore. And so with these emerging risks, because you're hard pressed right now in this environment to turn on the news and not hear about another breach that's happening, another weather event that's happening, those sort of things. And so, we don't want to come across as the boogeyman, right? We're not trying to like scare people about, the things that they have at risk, but how do you present it to them to where they are prioritizing taking care of these gaps where they may have left them open for so long and so far been able to kind of fare without them, Maya? So when you're thinking about rounding out accounts, what is your strategy on showing them and creating, not creating the need, because you mentioned that it sells itself, but how do you
Yeah.
bring it up and make it a priority, help them make it a priority?
Yes, well, I'll just, if I'm going through my book of business, I'll reach out to them and I'll see where there's a hole, or they're missing some sort of coverage for their business. And I'm like, what about this? Because, and I bring up a situation where they'll find the need that they don't have the coverage. And we'll go from there. I'm like, we'll just go back and forth discussing it. And I'll send them emails or something to remind them, then we follow up. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's really the key, is that being consistent and being persistent and letting them know that, we can't stick our heads in the sand and hope that these things go away, and that it's best for them to take care of business while they're thinking about it versus putting it off to the side, because we know life is lifing and people don't
Yeah.
always get back around, and everyone meant to do it until it's time. So quick reminder for those who are in the audience, I see some questions coming in the chat. If you can kindly move those questions to the Q&A box, that way we can go ahead and address them as they're coming in. But I do, because I did see one that came in here about the benefit of doing an agent of record change or broker of record change midterm. So do you ever see where that's actually advantageous to assume an existing policy versus trying to rewrite it versus waiting for that expiration date? So, Branden, I'll kick that to you first. BOR, AOR, is that something that you encourage, or where do you stand on that?
Yes, please, and thank you. Concisely. But I think what it is an opportunity. And I think the conversation is, yes, and where I can, I want to take it over midterm, because I'm not waiting to the renewal, because I can't assume that everything, my process matches the prior agent's process. So that just allows me an opportunity to make changes if there are changes to be made or endorsement. But the way that the conversation goes, the best way for me to help you is to see what you currently have. And if there are improvements that we can make those improvements. But the best way for me to do that is to take over the policy. And then that goes to some of the things that Maya mentioned, some of the things that you mentioned also too, Precious, is now we can open up that conversation. But midterm, I would rather have it at midterm versus renewal, because if there are any changes, I have time, and the renewal premium, there can be something that's left off. And that, when that would be the day that the claim happens, and then you find out that vehicle was never added, and now I'm on the
Mm,
hook for it. So, yeah.
that makes sense. What about you, Maya? How do you feel about moving midterm?
Oh, yes. That's if I can get a policy or a customer's interest, I'm going to grab it, hold on to it. Let's sign this AOR. And, I'm always saying what I can help you do better, with your policy, but I have to have it in order to make changes or advise you. And as long as I can get it on my book of business, then it'll renew and we can go from there. So that's not a question. I'm not turning away an AOR.
I love that, because the sooner you can get involved, the sooner you can
Yeah.
actually implement some of these recommendations. Because until then, we're just speculating on a policy that we don't have any, business really working with, because we can't execute on any sort of endorsements or the changes and the upgrades that we see happening. So, all right, y'all, we're starting to get some activity here. Some questions are starting to roll in. So I just want to make sure that I'm addressing them. Again, if you haven't, please drop it in the Q&A side for me so that we can get to them in order and make sure that we're responding. So I do see a question here as far as the captive agents. Now, I know both of you are in an independent space, but even with independent agents, we tend to have relationships where perhaps the majority of our business is placed or close relationships. So with these market changes, because what I'm seeing is that even beyond price, underwriting appetites are changing, retentions are changing, endorsements are being added on that restrict coverage. How do you suggest, how do you go about explaining to your customer what the difference is between this renewal coming up and maybe what they had, and especially if there's not an option to change it. Like I'm old enough to remember when deductibles were flat dollar amounts before they went to percentage base, and you're hard pressed to find that anymore. But making it plain to a customer, what is your strategy, Maya?
Well, I will go over the policy and I it increased. And I mean, I've done everything I can. There's no other company that can beat not necessarily the price, but everything that you want from an insurance company. I mean, that's what I do with them is I go over and we delve into the coverages. And I'm not trying to sell them on price because yeah, I'm selling them on that you're better protected with this company, or something like that.
Got it. Branden, what are your thoughts?
So I think that although I'm in a broker space, I look at those things as working with a captive, meaning, there's some carriers that are better for their insurance situation than others. And if I put on my captive hat, one of the things I would say is the captives are going to know their book as well or as anyone because they're the only show in town. So what that is an opportunity to get with whomever is doing the analytics or owns the book of business and say, I need to run a book of business review of those who are, and you can establish whatever your increase is. If you look at what the state increase is for your area, say it's 11%, I need everybody at 15%. And then you can get ahead of those conversations because you can leverage the relationship, you can leverage those things. But I'd also marry that with opportunities that have been lost before. So on one hand, there's always going to be downward pressure on the book, especially with a captive. Those new business policies, basically, you're going to supplement those with some of your legacy policyholders. But there are a number of opportunities that have been lost previously. So then that's an opportunity to marry the two. I lost these and the appetite changed. Let's revisit those. So some of the attrition that I'm going to experience is now counterbalanced in the sense that, but I would say if you're in a captive model, one of the biggest positives about that is book ownership, and you can run different analytics tables till the cows come home. But if you can get ahead of that and whatever your baseline is, which opportunities are experiencing the most rate increase, that allows you to get ahead of it. And that conversation will not only be appreciated, but if there is a move, you leave the door open to always come back because you got ahead of it.
I love that. I think that it speaks a lot to just professional relationships in general, that the goodbye be just as cordial as the hello, because sometimes you may lose a customer, but you don't want to burn a bridge. Because I've had situations where customers that unfortunately we weren't able to retain their business, but then they became my biggest advocate and they referred business because they're like, hey, look, she was honest with me, she was upfront. I'm not, as soon as I get these things handled, it's my intention to come back, so making sure we're making raving fans and ambassadors out there to spread the good news about our expertise and what we have to offer. So there's some questions that are coming in regards to, again, this market we're in. One of the questions is with the rise in digital agencies. So we're in a place now where we do business with customers that aren't even in our geographic area sometimes, especially if we are operating in multiple states. Branden, you talked about that earlier, some of the more difficult states. And so how have you been able to leverage technology or even AI to um, how do you integrate that into your processes, so that people aren't feeling like they're being pushed off to a bot, so that you leverage it, but you're still the trusted advisor?
It's open.
So we'll go. Branden, I'll ask you that first, and then
Yeah.
I want to hear from Maya as well. How have you been able to leverage that?
Mhm.
And so the digital age is upon us, different ways. And most of the times, the more savvy people are, they're going to put their policy into some sort of AI tool and ask it for recommendations to see if there's a mismatch, any misalignment between what you're saying and what they're saying. So what I do is get ahead of it. So I have some processes set up, whether it's calendar invites, when we talk about, owning that book of business, looking at X dates, things like that, where I'm placing those things on the calendar, and you have those automated messages that go out where they're able to respond. I think one of the things, even geography aside, because you're going to have to be careful about any coverage recommendation. So it's
Hmm.
always generic in the sense that I'm the licensed professional. I don't want to be replaced. I've been watching the Terminator just to kind of see what's going on, but I don't want to be replaced at all. But let's leverage the two. So one of the ways that I leverage is Marsh has something internal that we have, our own internal AI. So you can kind of put those tools to really work within your book and your clients. But then also too, when a question comes in or when I start to put out information, those newsletters I talked about, I put that together. It takes 5 minutes. All I'm doing is verifying and checking. So then those things will become that information gets aggregated, and now I've built my profile. I've been really diving into Claude and looking at the different assistants that you can set up. You can set up avatars to do specific tasks that you want them to do. And I use all that information to build those avatars and almost like a virtual assistant. So I'm able to get more done and be that much more productive. So I welcome the digital age. I think it's necessary. People say a necessary evil is necessary. It's only evil with the intent of how you're going to use it.
Mm,
That's where
that's
the
good.
evil
That's
comes
good.
in.
I like that. Yeah, because if we're using it for good, it can be leverage. It's a tool, not a
Yeah.
replacement. Maya, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm using, I have virtual assistants right now, and
Oh,
they're helping with helping with the inflow of the telephone. They answer the phone, and some customers are
I love that.
adamant, I want to speak to Maya. And I'm like, okay, we can talk. No. And so, yeah. So, and that's really, at first I wasn't as convinced or committed, but I'm so glad that I got with it, and I have virtual assistants that can help me so I can know, so I can focus on the customers and how I can make their policies better and more complete.
I love that because, this day and age, the consumer expectation is really what's putting pressure on insurance to have to innovate. Because in a world where I can order something and it show up on my doorstep tomorrow, we have more and more people who are working outside of the traditional, 9 to 5. They may not be able to come sit across from the desk from you. And so we've got to be able to meet them where they are and deliver on some of those deliverables. So, part of what we talked about a moment ago, it looks like we might have touched off a little bit of a, I don't want to say a nerve, but there's some additional questions since both of you are fans of doing agent of record and broker of record changes. So the question that we have is when you do a midterm AOR or BOR, how do you stay organized with what policies they have, loss payee, cert holders, and all of those? They said that they recently assumed an account midterm, but realized they didn't have all of the policies. Any advice on how to navigate that? So Maya, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
So what if you're only seeing a part of the picture? How do you address that as an agency?
I go for the ask. You have to ask. It's like, when are they coming up? And we can grab everything. Do you have this? Do you have this? And then you just get into a conversation with them. And if you listen to people, they'll tell you exactly what they have, what they need.
I agree.
So yeah.
I love that. Branden, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that when you're playing tug of war because there's still an old agent involved, and so they're straddling this fence in the interim?
Yeah, so it depends on the client temperament, and how you met them, the COI. So where I can, I'm going to leverage if there was an introduction from a realtor or wealth advisor, someone of that nature, I'm going to leverage them and say, listen, I need this information and try to put together a conference call. So, hey, who's all in your team? Your CPA, I need everybody on this call at this time. And then I'm getting all the information and they don't feel the pressure to provide it. And then, just like Maya said, is having that honest conversation says, in order to best be effective for you, these are the things that I need. And if there's any hesitation in giving that, I may not be the agent for you. I will fire a client in a minute because at the end of the day, I'm doing something for you. I mean, we're getting something out of relationship, commission, those things, but I'd rather have someone that's willing to work with me than to be pulling teeth. And again, it's a delicate balance because, I'm no fool now. The most, that kind of commission, you might do a little bit more. Your line might be, a move just a little bit off to the side, but at the end of the day, I will fire a client in a second. Hey, I've asked, you don't want to give it to me,
Yeah.
that's fine. And again, I think even if I put my hat on 19, 17, 15 years ago, I probably will be more reluctant to do that. But I've realized that, issues coming in lead to issues going out.
Mm.
And typically, all business isn't good business, no matter the premium. And I think that's a tougher lesson to learn as an agent, especially starting out. I want to write everything. But I think, the more selective and the more field underwriter hat you put on is better. And if you don't want to give me something I need, then I can't help you and I'm not the person for you. And that's okay. It's not you, it's me, or really it's you, not me. But however you want to phrase that. So
Yeah.
that's how it is.
I love that we're having that conversation about, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because sometimes we have a prospect, we have an account, and there maybe their definition or expectations don't align with the type of agency or the type of environment that you're in. So, Maya, when you have a prospect, but you're starting to kind of get those spidey senses that maybe they're going to be a little bit difficult to engage with because some of their expectations aren't on par with what how your agency moves. How do
Yeah.
you, as Brandon said, fire a client or decide not to pursue a prospect?
Well, I can get a general feel in that first conversation. If I ask for information, they're like, well, I can give you this, this, and this. That's not how it works. I mean, I need everything so I can write the great policy for you. So if I have to tug too much, I'm like, it's not worth it. But I had to learn that over the years. So yeah, like you said, Brandon stated, when you're a new agent, you want everything, you're willing to fight for it. But in the end, you're gonna like if you have to fight so hard up front, then it's going to be
Oh,
at the bottom when they're going out. Yeah, how you meet a person is how you will leave a person. So yeah,
yeah, I agree with that because sometimes there's those telltale signs that, hey, I don't know, I've got this fish on the hook, but it's fighting back. And I'm trying to reel it in, and sometimes you got to cut that line
yeah.
and go pursue, other relationships. So, we're getting almost to the end of our time together, and I want to make sure, just taking a look. So I do want to address a couple of questions that have come into the Q&A box. As a just general reminder. Here at NAAIA, we have partnerships, we have relationships, we have sponsorships with a multitude of carriers, service providers. And so when we have these conversations, we try to keep this very market agnostic because I wouldn't want to step on anyone's toes, disparage, so we're not getting into that. So there's a couple of questions that have come in as far as market recommendations and tool recommendations. And so I'm going to very politely redirect those because again, we don't want to disturb any of the sponsors that help make these programs possible. But there is a question that came in as we're talking about leveraging AI, even in as Brandon said, we're the first line underwriters. You're the ones that decide if this is even a good fit to proceed with. And so the question is, do you have any thoughts about how data scraping and AI may inadvertently replace some of the direct conversations with clients that could reveal more subtle information and details about a risk and round out your knowledge of their operations? So, do you see where there's times where that might be a disadvantage? Because, as Maya, you said, through a conversation, you're doing like a magician, you're pulling out this ribbon, you're pulling more and more based on an answer. Do you see how sometimes innovation may tamp that down, your opportunity to really understand an account?
So in front of me right now, I don't see that as an obstacle. I think that this helps me what the virtual assistants can grab, and then once I speak to the customer, I think it's nothing but a plus, and I don't think that's holding it, back or it's a
Gotcha.
good thing.
What's your take on that, Brandon? Do you see where sometimes these automations take away from that human element of being able to understand what their true exposures are?
Yes, I see that just a little bit different. I liken it to Netflix. And if you watch something one time and then they'll say, you may like this. And I'm like, I may not. I don't even know what else I like. I haven't even seen what else is on the menu. So now you're kind of putting me down a rabbit hole that I may not want to go into. So I agree that there's going to be some efficiencies gained. You're going to have, some of the things that you can extrapolate out from a data standpoint, and you can narrow it down so you have more of a target. Where I like to be the optimist and say where I've seen it play out is there is an intentional, sometimes there's a bent, there's an inherent built-in bias that kind of slants away from the conversations that we could have. And I know even in my industry, a lot of times of what I get sometimes working with athletes, and this is a real thing, they'll say, we don't want NFL and NBA athletes. This has been
Mm,
stated. They'll put that out there. Now, okay, us being NAIA, you can do some math and see the representation and say, so that would be an example of an easy data script. But then if we look, okay, this person has been in the league, they're on their fifth, they're on their third or fourth contract. They've, have a stable environment, never been in the headlines, those things. Does that meet the model? That may have been excluded if we just take a data script. So I think that there's going to be some balance to that. And I think that as these things are evolving, it's going to be up to professionals like us to input and guide that data so then that we're not left out of, what they call like the digital revolution. Because, from face recognition, it's only geared to recognize certain types of faces. Those faces
mm-hmm.
may not be representative of our community. So I'd like to kind of look at the balance and just understand the large picture so I'm not missing out on anything. So I agree, but there's elements where I disagree because, like I said, nothing frustrates me more than being on YouTube and going down a rabbit hole that I did not want to go down because I watched one video. Like,
Understood. And
yeah.
and that makes a lot of sense because we are still in a place and stage where we have to advocate for our customers, for our communities, for our prospects, and we're working within imperfect systems that weren't necessarily designed with us as the target user. And so being able to decipher and be able to go to bat for things that may have otherwise been tossed to the side is, I think, an important part, especially in the NAIA community that we're tasked with. So as we're getting ready to wrap, I'm a firm believer, if you've been on this with me, you guys already know that I want this not just be a spectatorship for those who are joining us. I want them to have that thing that they can go back to their desk and implement today. So lightning round kind of words of wisdom, takeaways for our audience as far as how to get through the dog days of summer and still be positioned for success. So Maya, I will give the floor to you. What sage advice do you have for these agents?
One in general, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So you need to stay up on your CE credits and get from it what you can. And I still think it's great to go out into the community so they can recognize you and everyone can see your place. That's what I think.
I love that. Absolutely. And you and your family, thank you all for serving the community generationally. I think that is amazing. And if people want to connect with you and hear more about your insights, what's the best way to do so?
Um, Contact me via email, Maya at mywinins.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're able to join us for today's discussion. Brandon, same thing. Takeaways, words of advice, what you got for our agents?
So the thing I would think about is we can have all the tools, but the tools are only as effective as those of using them. And there's nothing like conversations and making the phone ring. That's tried and true. So I think one of the things that I've refocused on is working with COIs and making them my internal customers. Because if I'm finding the people that have access to the people, if I find one person that can send me 100 people, then that is as efficient as me finding 100 people. So that's something, even in summer, I think, don't get discouraged. Look at this as you're setting up your fall. And although there may be slowing periods, think about it. This is a time where people move. So you may refocus your strategy and say, maybe I need to engage with more realtors because people are moving ahead of school traditionally. Maybe I need to look at some of the more, I guess, fun elements of my business because people are more out. And then this is the time to educate. But the one thing I would say is tried and true is emails. That's going to be LinkedIn's going to be one thing, but there's nothing like getting out in the community, coffee, building relationships and making the phone ring. Because if no one knows who you are and what you do, then your phone will never ring. And I don't think that's going away in the industry. So I would just say, don't get
Amazing.
discouraged and get out there and shake some hands, meet some people and do things that you like to do and bring people along with you.
Fantastic. Well, Maya, Branden, I appreciate you guys joining us and being so generous again with these tips and gems and sage wisdom for those agents, especially, as they're going through the cycles with the market, with the seasons and just all of the things. And so for everyone who joined us, I want to thank you as well for seeing value in spending your time with us this afternoon. I want to encourage you to connect with your local chapter leadership for upcoming programs that they may have locally. And of course, registration is open for our national conference, and we do have some wonderful agent-centric things coming up there. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you for watching this flashback episode with NAAIA. We appreciate your time and hope you found the insights valuable. Stay tuned for more enriching content. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the NAAIA community.